I don't know if he likes it or not. I don't know if it'll stick, but I like it. And so probably going to keep calling him that. If you got your Bible on you, turn with me to Proverbs chapter 3, and we're going to get this thing going today. Proverbs 3, 1 through 12. We're still in our series called Popular, where we're looking at some of the most popular Bible verses in the Scripture and trying to look at them in their actual context and understand them as they were meant to be understood. Today we're looking at Proverbs 3. When I was in college, I had a couple of public speaking classes. I mean, clearly y'all can tell, right? Hey. And one of my professors, I remember talking about, he's like, you never, one of the biggest mistakes a lot of public speakers make is they get up in front of people and they'll tell people that they're nervous. Because once you tell people you're nervous, people start looking for like nervous tics and things, you know. And so I'm not nervous. How about that? So stop looking, and just listen. I will tell you this. I think the sermon today is gonna. I said that to say this. I think the first part of the sermon today is gonna be kind of boring, you know, but something can be boring and true all at the same time. So I would ask you to try your best, if you can, to hang with me. Proverbs 3, 1 through 12, this is what the text says. It says, "My son, do not forget my teaching, but let your heart keep my commandments. For length of days and years of life and peace they will add to you. Let not steadfast love and faithfulness forsake you. Bind them around your neck, write them on the tablet of your heart, so you will find favor and good success in the sight of God and man." And then here we come to the popular verses in this passage. It would be Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, which says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths." Verse 7 continues, "Be not wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. It will be healing to your flesh and refreshment to your bones. Honor the Lord with your wealth and with the first fruits of all your produce. Then your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will be bursting with wine. My son, do not despise the Lord's discipline or be weary of his reproof, for the Lord reproves him whom he loves, as a father the son in whom he delights." Pray with me. Father, I come to you in the name of Jesus. I pray over this room. Pray that I'd say something this morning that matters. I pray that your power would be made perfect in my weakness. That's why I'm here, just to offer myself as a vessel, hopefully for the speaking of your truth, the speaking of the gospel, the lifting high of you and your authority and your glory and your throne. And that's the goal today for those who are in this place and those who are worshiping with us online. Just pray that you'd move. Give us eyes to see what you want to show us and ears to hear what you want to say to us. And all God's people said, amen, amen. So we're talking about Proverbs chapter 3, 5, and 6. "Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths." So let's just talk about the book of Proverbs as a whole for a moment, okay? The book of Proverbs is 31 chapters long. First 29 chapters sound quite a bit different than the last two. The majority of the chapters of Proverbs are poetry, but interspersed throughout the book, there are also these sort of short, teachable essays. On the whole, the book of Proverbs is about wisdom. It is a book of memorable maxims written for young people to memorize and then try to apply to their lives. Now, authorship of the book of Proverbs is traditionally credited to Solomon, okay? But most scholars don't actually believe that Solomon wrote every word of the book. I would be in that category. I don't think he wrote every word of it either. Because I think it's more helpful for us to think about the book of Proverbs as a collection of wise sayings. It's like Solomon, or maybe Solomon's royal librarian, have taken wisdom from different cultures and wisdom from different perspectives, and they've gathered this wisdom together and they funneled it through a Hebrew lens, and then they have tried to organize it and protect it and preserve it, and then ultimately to share it And that's how we get the book of Proverbs that we currently have access to today. Now, let me give you an example of what I'm talking about here, just so you don't think I'm preaching heresy. Scholars have noted in the book of Proverbs a pretty significant connection to the book of Proverbs to an even older Egyptian document known as the Instruction of Amenemope. Okay? Most specifically, Proverbs chapters 22 through 24 seem to make quite a few references to this book, to the Instruction of Amenemope. Just a couple of examples of this I'll share with you, hoping you see what I see and others have seen. Proverbs 22 says, "Do not rob the poor because he's poor, or crush the afflicted at the gate." The Instruction of Amenemope 4 and 5 says, "Guard yourself from robbing the poor, from being violent to the weak." Another one is Proverbs 22, 24, and 25. It says, "Make no friendship with a man given to anger, nor go with a wrathful man, lest you learn his ways and entangle yourself in a snare." The Instruction of Amenemope 11, 13 through 18 says, "Do not associate with the rash man, nor approach him for conversation. When he makes a statement to snare you, you may be released by your answer." And these connections go on for more than just a couple of sayings. I mean, if you read parts of the Instructions of Amenemope and you read parts of Proverbs, you'll note a lot of the same words. You'll note a lot of the same rhythms. At least, on the surface, it would appear that maybe a Hebrew scribe has taken this Egyptian document and copied down or translated from Egyptian into Hebrew several of these wise sayings. Kind of looks like a good way for us to think about it, I think, would be like a college student or high school student having ChatGPT write them a paper, and then you go back on the paper and you make just enough adjustments to make it look like you did it. Anybody ever done that? Shame on you. You're going to hell. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I don't think you are. I don't know. I don't determine whether or not you go to hell, but I don't think that ChatGPT is going to be the reason. So yeah, that's kind of what you see. It looks like the Hebrew document, they look very similar, but there's enough difference that it's not exact, an exact imprint or an exact copy. Now, some scholars have tried to use an observation such as this to discredit the Bible. Okay, they see that and they go, well, what that means to me is if that's not original, then how can it be reliable? They're like, it looks to us just like that. What the Hebrews are doing is they're just taking this information directly from Egyptian wisdom and they're trying to claim that as their own. It sort of looks like plagiarism, right? But I don't think that's what's happening here at all. I actually really think that what Solomon and his scribes were doing in the book of Proverbs, I think is quite brilliant, okay? And I'm going to make an effort to try and show you what I mean by that. This is what I mean. What I think Solomon was doing in the book of Proverbs, and one of the reasons that I believe he is rightly considered to be the wisest man ever to live aside from Jesus, is because what I think Solomon was trying to do is I think he was trying to root cultural wisdom in the heart of God. I think he was trying to root cultural wisdom in the heart of God. I think he was trying to anchor these great truths of old in the Lord. I think he was trying to make a connection between traditional wisdom and Yahweh. The way that I think Solomon approached the world is that wherever he found truth, he just traced that truth back to his creator. I think he was kind of a precursor to St. Augustine, who would later come along and say, all truth is God's truth. And so anywhere that Solomon found truth, I think he staked his claim on it. He goes, well, that's true. If that's true, then it's the Lord's. Now, I told y'all that this was going to be a little bit boring, and I sort of apologize for that. But this is why I think this idea matters, okay? The reason that I think it's important that we have this conversation, the reason I think it's important that Solomon was trying to do what he was trying to do is because truth that has no roots can be altered. Does that make sense? Like truth that's not rooted in anything, truth that has no roots can be changed. Truth that has no roots it's flexible. Truth that has no roots is pliable. Just look at the state of our world currently, the state of our culture, where traditional understandings of relatively simple things like concepts of gender and identity and sexuality are being torn down and questioned and modified. And that's what happens when truth doesn't have roots. That's what happens when we try to make ourselves our own gods. When the battle becomes your truth versus my truth, everybody loses. When the battle becomes, when that's the struggle that we are engaging in, it's your truth versus my truth, that always ends in wickedness and moral degradation. But truths that are anchored in the Lord, wisdom that is rooted in the heart of God, that's the kind of truth that is sustainable. That's the kind of truth that is absolute. That is the kind of truth that holds. My friends, I have to be honest with you today and say this to you. I love you all, but I don't care about your truth. Not only do I not care about your truth, I don't even care about my truth. I only care about God's truth, period. Now, I think Solomon, when he heard something wise, whether it be from Egyptian culture or whether it be from Hebrew culture, or really any culture for that matter, what I think Solomon did is when he heard something that was true, he staked the Lord's claim on it. So, for example, when he's reading through the instruction of Amenemope and he reads a verse in there that says, "Don't take advantage of the poor," he goes, "That sounds like my Lord." When he reads a verse in the instruction of Amenemope that says, "Don't associate with angry men. Bad things happen when you connect yourself with angry people," I think Solomon's like, "I think that sounds like my Lord." And by grounding this wisdom in the heart of God, I don't think he was trying to plagiarize the words as much as he was trying to preserve them. And that's really important because if you think about it, what he did worked. And the way we know it worked is that non-believers and believers alike, everybody in this room, we've heard of the book of Proverbs. How many of you before today had ever heard of the instruction of Amenemope? So he did exactly what he was trying to do. He found truth, he grabbed hold of it, rooted it in Yahweh, and then protected it and preserved it, and then passed it down to us. And then he shared it. In his book on Christian doctrine, Augustine wrote this. He said, "Nay, but let every good and true Christian understand that wherever truth may be found, it belongs to his master." John Calvin picked up where Augustine left off, and Calvin wrote this. He said, "All truth is from God, and consequently, if wicked men have said anything that is true and just, we ought not to reject it, for it has come from God." Church, listen to me. It is not necessary for the church at large and for Christianity to constantly be at odds with science and to constantly be at odds with philosophy and really to constantly be at odds with modern scholarship in general. Because when truth is discovered in any of those fields, really, our only responsibility as believers is to come in and stake our claim on it. Like the scientific world's like, "Hey, guess what? We found out about gravity." And then Christians are like, "Gravity, God's idea." The philosophical world's like, "Hey, let's talk about ideas of ethics and morality." Christians, morality, ethics, God's idea. Anytime truth is discovered anywhere in the world, what's our responsibility? We stake our claim on it. Why? Because all truth is God's truth. It belongs to Him. If something is true, it finds its origin in God. If something is true, it finds its origin in the one who said about himself, I am the way, and I am the truth, and I am the lie. So we see truth in the world. We just go, all truth, God's truth. That sounds like my God to me. Now, Proverbs 3, 1 through 12 is a pretty good example of this because in it, Solomon offers some significant words of wisdom, but also the entire passage is drenched in God. I mean, at least 10 times in those 12 verses, you see references to the Lord, you see references to God, to He, or to Him. And this text is sort of structured, Proverbs 3, 1 through 12 is sort of structured like a traditional Baptist sermon, okay? In that it has an intro, and it has 3 points, and then it has an outro or a conclusion. And the intro is essentially the father telling his son to keep God's commands and to hold on tightly to his unfailing love. And the conclusion is when the father tells the son, don't despise the Lord's discipline, because the Lord, of course, corrects those he delights in. He wants to correct and guide them. And then at the center of this passage, there are 3 pieces of practical advice that we're going to spend the rest of our time talking about today, where Solomon says these 3 things. 1, he says, trust in the Lord. 2, he says, fear the Lord. And then 3, he says, honor the Lord. And each one of these recommendations comes with a corresponding promise. So first, what I want to talk to you about is, well, what does it mean to trust in the Lord? What does it mean to trust in the Lord? The word trust in Hebrew is the word batah, B-A-T-A-H. And the interesting thing about the word batah is that most of the time, it's used quite a bit in the Old Testament, but most of the time when it gets used, it has a negative connotation to it, okay? Because batah, people had a tendency, I guess, in their culture, much like in our culture, to put their trust in things that weren't trustworthy. And so a lot of times, that's why when you read about it in the Old Testament, it comes with a negative connotation. My favorite time that the word batah gets used, there's 2 times, but it's talking about the same story, is in 2 Kings chapter 18 and in Isaiah chapter 36, okay? In these 2 places, let me give you a little background on what was going on at this time. At that time in Israel's history, the king of Judah was named Hezekiah. And the Assyrians were about to come in and destroy Judah, and they were going to take Hezekiah captive. And Hezekiah made 2 particular moves to try and get the Assyrians off of his back, and both of them were pretty detestable in the eyes of God, okay? The first thing that Hezekiah tried to do is, when the Assyrians approached, is he tried to bribe them. Instead of just trusting in his God to protect him, to lead him to safety, he tried to bribe them. He offered them gold and silver, and not only did he offer them gold and silver, that would have been bad enough, but he had some of the gold stripped from the temple and offered that to the Assyrian king, hoping that that would allow him to keep his throne, which of course it did not. And if that wasn't bad enough, in and of itself, pretty bad, the second thing that Hezekiah did, which I think was probably even worse, is he reached out to the Egyptians for help. Now, how crazy is that? Like, these are the same Egyptians that held their ancestors captive, same Egyptians that enslaved them, same Egyptians, Pharaoh and the plagues, same Egyptians that had them making bricks out of straw and mud. Hezekiah reached out to the Pharaoh, reached out to the Egyptians, hey, will you come help us in our fight against the Assyrians? Well, one of the leaders of the Assyrian military approached Hezekiah, and essentially when he found out that they'd reached out to Egypt for help, he was criticizing this decision, and in some ways making fun of Hezekiah, and really basically just coming to him like, dude, wow, what were you thinking? This is what he says. This is in Isaiah 36:6. I like this verse. This man says, on behalf of the king of Assyria, he says, behold, you are trusting, that's batah, you are trusting in Egypt, that broken reed of a staff, which will pierce the hand of any man who leans on it. Such is Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to all who trust him. So in this particular passage in the Old Testament, in 2 Kings 18, Isaiah 36, we see for the first time the mention of a splintered reed or a bruised staff. And this man, leader of the Assyrians, is kind of mocking Hezekiah, and he's like trying to lean on Egypt, trying to lean on the Pharaoh. He goes, that's like trying to lean on a splintered staff. He's like, you're going to put all your weight on that staff, and then it's going to break, and it's going to pierce you. It's going to cut you. The very thing that you think you're trusting in and trying to lean on, you're going to lean, it's going to break, and it's going to make you bleed. And one of the reasons that I love that image so much is because I think this is the kind of metaphor that it wasn't just true back then, but it's true today. I think a lot of us, you can imagine, when we talk about a splintered staff or a bruised reed, I want you to think about it almost like a wooden walking stick that has some structural damage in the stick that you can't see, right? And you're walking with this stick, and eventually you lean on it a little too much, and the stick splits, and the splinters pierce your hand. How many of you all have in your lives tried to lean on people or things that you thought were trustworthy, and eventually that thing broke and it cut you? You know? I mean, this isn't just stories. These aren't just things that happened back then. These are things that happen today. And so when Solomon is telling us here, trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding, that's what he's advising us against. He's going, even your own understanding, it's a bruised reed. It's a splintered staff. You lean on it too much, it's going to break and cut you. He goes, how about instead of trying to lean on something that will pierce you, how about you try to lean on the one who will be pierced for you? Instead of trying to pick up the bruised reed, the splintered staff, why not go straight to the good shepherd? Because that's our Father, Yahweh, is the only one strong enough to hold our dreams and to hold our shame and to hold our doubts. Trust in the Lord. Lean not on your own understanding. Most of the things that we try to lean on are weak and will collapse underneath our weight. Second, what does it mean to fear the Lord? That's what it means to trust the Lord. What does Solomon mean when he talks about fearing the Lord? In Exodus chapter 20, verse 20, Moses said this to the people. He said, and I want you to hear my words here because I think it's important. Moses says, do not fear, for God has come to test you, that the fear of him may be before you, that you may not sin. That's a really weird way to say something. I mean, you hear that, if you actually read that quote, it sounds pretty contradictory. Because at first, you got Moses saying to the people, he goes, hey, don't fear. Then he goes, because God has come to test you, that you might fear him. Don't fear, but God's come to test you that you might fear. Seems like a contradiction. So I read that and I'm thinking, well, what does that mean? And I think Charles Spurgeon helps us here when Spurgeon said this. Spurgeon said that the fear of God is the death of every other fear. Like a mighty lion, it chases all other fears before it. The fear of God is the death of every other fear. Like a mighty lion, it chases all other fear before it. Church, listen to me. To fear God is to revere him. To fear God is to be in awe of him. To fear God is to realize that he is different from us. To fear God is to tremble at his word. It is to tremble in his presence. It is to tremble in an acknowledgement of his holiness. To fear God is to realize that there is nothing stronger, nothing holier, nothing more glorious than our great God. I want to share with y'all something that happened this past Wednesday night. On Wednesday nights, me and my brother, we lead middle school boys small group, and we are taking these boys through Rooted. All of our students are going through the Rooted Bible study right now, and this particular week, our study was on strongholds. And Rooted does a pretty great job of talking about strongholds. And one of the ways that it approaches them is it really tries to get a person to think beyond just the behavior to the root of the problem. So it's like, it's not just going to talk about the sin that is produced by bad behavior, but it wants to get to the root. Like, why do you do the things that you do? And so if you've got that, and we can pull it up, this is the way. So these are just some examples of how it worked. And this is the way that we did it with our boys. I think it was me, it was Derek, and we had 5 middle school boys. And it's the way that it works in the book is you have on the left side, you get strongholds. On the right side, you get freedoms, or freedom from that stronghold, a verse that might speak to that freedom. And so the way that we approached it is, we looked at the list on the left, and we went through them one by one, like I would read, and I'd say bitterness. And then I would say examples: resentment, hate, unforgiveness, anger, violence, revenge. And what I wanted the boys to do is I wanted them to underline the emotions that they often felt. So, for example, if they were looking at this and a kid was like, yeah, I deal with anger sometimes, they would underline anger. If they dealt with revenge, feelings of vengefulness, revenge, they would underline revenge. And we did this one by one. You can click through to the next one. And so what we were trying to do is I wanted them to just kind of speak to the emotions that they felt, and then I was going to go back after we got to the end of it. I was going to go back, and we were going to try and see, like, you know, if one of the boys had underlined 4 emotions in a particular one, I was like, that's probably a pretty good sign that that's a stronghold that they struggle with. Does that make sense? And so that's what they did. So this one, the reason I had go back one. No, my fault. Forward again. The reason that we took that method is because I did this with a group of adult men that I'm a part of the study with. And like, for example, for me, I got in the despair section and I had circled like things or underlined things that I struggle with. I was like, self-pity, yes. Isolation, yes. Addiction, sometimes. Hopelessness, yes. And then I was like, okay, despair is probably a stronghold that I wrestle with. And so Psalm 34, 17 and 18, Rooted provides a corresponding truth that might help counter the stronghold that you deal with, something that may help you achieve freedom. So that's a lot of words to say this. We're doing this with the boys, and we're going through it one by one, and at this point, again, there's 5 of them, and really, it doesn't seem like anything is sticking too much. Like, we'll be in a section, and a kid might be like, yeah, anger, I deal with anger. But it's like 1 per section. Like, it didn't really seem like we were getting anywhere. And then go to the next one, Byron. And then to the next one. And then to the next one. And so we're going through them one by one, and I don't know how many of them there are, maybe 14, maybe 16, something like that. And as we're clicking through them, again, each kid's marking stuff down. Yeah, I struggle. And they're being honest. I love it. They're being vulnerable. It's sweet. But up to this point, it's just one by one, like 1 in each section. And then, church, we get to this one, and it's fear. And as soon as I read the word fear, they all immediately said, that's us. That's me. Every one of those things on there, phobias, compulsions, perfectionism, fear of failure, being afraid of being harmed. Every one of these middle school boys, they go, yeah, that's ours. We're afraid. And it broke me. I mean, it made me pause for a minute because I'm thinking, these are kids. And I'm going, what have we gotten so wrong that our young people are so scared, you know? I mean, it probably doesn't help that, like, social media outrage probably doesn't help. The fact that every piece of news that happens anywhere in the world is available to every person in the world, that probably doesn't help. A middle school being put on lockdown 3 days in a row, that probably doesn't help. And though I don't fully understand why, I just want you all, I want to acknowledge before you today that this is a problem for our young people, okay? They're scared. And them being scared hurts me. And corresponding verse that gets offered to fear. When I was the last time, truthfully, I talk about how the fear of the Lord makes us tremble. The last time that I trembled was this last Wednesday night, reading this word over them, because the corresponding verse that gets offered, the freedom verse, there are two, but the one I want to read is Matthew 10. Except I'm going to start in 26, and you can pull that down. Matthew 10, 26, starting in 26 says this. This is Jesus talking about fear. Talking about fear of God. And I want you to see the connections that he makes. He says, so have no fear of them, for nothing is covered that will not be revealed, or hidden that will not be known. What I tell you in the dark, say in the light, and what you hear whispered, proclaim on the housetops. Listen, and do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell. Listen to what follows that up, though. He says in verse 29, are not two sparrows sold for a penny, and not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father? But even the hairs of your head are all numbered. Fear not, therefore, you are of more value than many sparrows. I read that passage to the boys the other night, and I felt like I physically trembled when I finished, because I thought, man, the truth of that passage is so rich and it's so powerful that just in these 5 verses, Jesus is trying to convince us. He goes, hey, you need to fear the Lord. You need to stop fearing anything else. Don't fear anything that can't throw your body into hell. Don't fear that stuff. You need to fear the Lord, and then you also need to know that he knows the number of hairs on your head, and that you are more valuable to him than many sparrows. And I started to think about what that might mean. I mean, I have this idea that maybe one of the reasons that our young people are so afraid, maybe it does have to do with a lack of reverence that we hold for God. I mean, maybe there is something to revering God, hallowing his name, that will make us less afraid of lesser things. But I think about it like this. It's like, imagine that you get lost in the wilderness, or you're lost in a jungle. There are 2 things that you need to know if you're lost in a jungle for you to know that you're safe. The first thing you need to know would be that the lion is the king of the jungle, and that there is nothing in the jungle that is as strong or as powerful as the lion. And the second thing you need to know is that the lion is your friend, that the lion is on your side. If you can hold those truths at the same time, that your God is all powerful, that he is holy, that he is glorious, that he is other, that there is nothing in this world that compares to his greatness and his goodness. And sometimes you can think about that and it makes you shudder. And then at the same time, you can also hold on to this idea that he likes you and he's for you and he's on your side and he's with you. I think that's the safest place for us to be. Holding on to those 2 truths at the same time. I'm not afraid of anything in the jungle because the lion's my friend. I'm not afraid when I find myself in the wilderness. I'm not afraid of being in the wilderness because I know the Lion of Judah and I feel protected in his presence. All that said, I would ask you to be praying for our young people and praying out against fear. Lastly, what does it mean to honor the Lord? Honor is the Hebrew word kavod. Kavod in Hebrew just means weightiness or glory. So when we talk about the kavod of God, all we're talking about is, you can imagine a scale, an old school scale with two sides. And what Solomon is trying to tell us here is that you can put anything in this world on one side of the scale. If you put God on the other side, he is more weighty, more holy. The scale will always dip in that side's favor. The idea being, if God is the weightiest thing in the world, we probably should offer more weight to him. 3 truths offered to us in Proverbs. We are to trust in the Lord, fear the Lord, honor the Lord, all truth,